Thank y'all. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to come back on this podium for Hobnob. Thanks to the Mississippi Economic Council. And I particularly want to thank the Consul General for being here, Consul General Brereton, for traveling to our state. You know, we conservatives in Mississippi believe in free trade, and it's great to have a partner like Canada, which allows for us to see free trade flowing from our borders to theirs and vice versa. I also want to thank Speaker Gunn, who just spoke. I will tell you, I could not have a better partner in the legislative branch of government of moving strong, conservative, pro-growth legislation through the process than Speaker Gunn, and I'm so glad to be able to speak immediately following him. I also had an opportunity to speak to Governor Bryant. I want to thank him for his leadership in creating that environment that we talked about. The governor and I traveled all over Mississippi last year during the campaign, and we heard repeatedly, over and over and over, that our #1 priority must be job creation. We must bring better and higher paying jobs to Mississippi. But we also have a political philosophy which says government does not create jobs. Government simply creates an environment which encourages the private sector to invest capital and create jobs. And as Speaker Gunn alluded to earlier today, that's exactly what we tried to do in our first session back in January, February, March, and April. And it is the results, the proof is in the pudding. And the fact of the matter is, Governor Bryant called this the most business-friendly session in modern Mississippi history. And the reason everyone believes that is because of the legislation that we passed. We did things this year like we decided that we needed to reform our workers' compensation system so as to create. If you feel the need to applaud, it's okay with me. But we wanted to create that level playing field between employers and employees so that we could encourage businesses in our state to invest capital in our state. After years and years and years and years of discussing the inventory tax and how it made us non-competitive, this year in the Mississippi legislature, we eliminated the inventory tax going forward. And that's something we should be very proud of. Just last week, Speaker Gunn and I had the opportunity, along with our two chairmen in the House and the Senate, Senator Hobson, Representative Baker, to stand on a national stage in front of a group called the U.S. Chamber of Commerce when they gave us their legislative award as the only state in the country because of the work that was done on our Attorney General Sunshine Act. They said it was the most business-friendly piece of legislation that passed anywhere in the country last year, and they awarded Mississippi with that great honor. Whether you agree with the policy or not, surely we can all agree that any time the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor of our state is standing on a national stage and being recognized by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as a good place to do business, that's good for our business climate. I also believe that intrinsic within our job creation efforts, we must improve the education attainment level of our citizens. As Speaker Gunn said earlier, we have got to continue to improve our workforce and improve our education to get there. We did tremendous work in that regard this year. We've got more work to do, and I want to talk about it from both points. First of all, this year in the budgeting process, we said public education is a priority. This year, in our budget, total expenditures increased 0.4%, approximately $17 to $18 million, yet we increased funding for K-12 education by $30 million. We increased funding for our community colleges by $6 million. We increased funding, or gave level funding, for our institutions of higher learning. And so although total education spending was up by almost $35 million year over year, total government spending was only up $17 million. So we invested in our priorities while cutting expenses everywhere else in the budget. One of the things we did this year that I think illustrates how focused we are on finding efficiencies in government. This year, we decided to pass a bill, thanks to Senator Nancy Collins and the Accountability, Efficiency, and Transparency Committee, which will reduce the number of automobiles in state government. It's an issue that I campaigned on because we have 7,500 automobiles and 30,000 employees in Mississippi government. That's one automobile for every 4 employees. Now, how many of you in the business sector have a ratio anywhere similar to that? I think I know the answer. So this year, we put a moratorium on new automobile purchases for 1 year, although I think we may look at it again this year. It's going to save $12.5 million in expenses in this fiscal year alone. And we also decided that we would reduce the fleet by 2% a year over the next 3 years to get control of the growing number of automobiles in state government. It's just one example of the kind of efficiencies that we're looking for. But in addition to investing in our priority of education, we're also committed to reforming our educational system. This year, the Mississippi Legislature, again, after years and years and years of discussions for reducing the number of school districts, we actually consolidated school districts in 2 counties in our state. This year, when looking at our educational system, we passed a bill which would mandate testing for dyslexia for every student across the state. This year in educational reform, we passed a bill that became law that changes the nomenclature associated with how we rate our schools. Historically, and this is something that's been supported by your organization for years, historically we've had a 7-tiered system in which the nomenclature did not accurately reflect what was going on in our school districts. In fact, in that 7-tiered system, there were 3 tiers at the top: star, high-performing, and successful districts. In looking at those successful districts, there were 50 of them. In 14 of those districts, a majority of their individual schools were rated below successful or worse. In 2 school districts in our state that were rated successful, they did not have one individual school that was rated successful or better. It was a convoluted system that parents and grandparents didn't understand, and so we passed a system this year going forward that's simple and parents and grandparents can understand. Going forward, our school districts and our schools will receive an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F. This system's going to work for us because every parent understands what to expect from an A, and every parent in Mississippi knows we can do better than a C. But you don't have to trust my opinion that this is going to work to improve educational attainment in our state. Look at what's happened in other places. In the state of Florida, they passed this legislation in 1999. In 12 years, they've increased what it took to be an A or B school at least 6 different times. When they first passed it 12 years ago, they had approximately 600 schools that were rated A and B. They had approximately 600 schools that were rated D and F. 12 years later, in 2011, they had over 2,000 schools that were rated A and B. They had less than 200 that were rated D and F. Under Governor Jindal's leadership, the state of Louisiana passed similar legislation just 2 years ago. Just last week, they came out with the statistics. In year two, they saw a 66% increase in the number of A schools, and they saw the number of D and F schools drop from 44% of the total to 36% of the total. You see, I believe very strongly that in our state we can do just like Florida and just like Louisiana. If you raise the level of expectations on administrators, on teachers, on parents, and on our students, most importantly, they will rise up and meet those increased level of expectations. And that's what education reform is all about. In the Senate this year, we'll continue to push for meaningful school choice legislation, including public charter schools. We'll continue to push for the need for appointed school superintendents instead of elected school superintendents. This is a tough issue for me because I live in Rankin County with a fantastic elected superintendent. But here's the facts, folks. In the entire country, there are 150 elected superintendents. Over half of those reside in the state of Mississippi. If we were in the upper decile of performance, if we were in the top 5 states in the country, that might be okay. But instead, we're in the lower decile. We can do better because every kid in our state deserves an opportunity for success. We all know we can do better. But I want you to know, and Speaker Gunn said this earlier, we can't get this done. We can't continue to improve our options and improve our educational system through legislation without your help. We need you on the front lines back home, working with your individual legislator, because a couple of these bills passed this year by wide margins in one chamber or the other. But we need everyone to come together, fighting for what's most important, and that is an improved education attainment level so we can continue to work together to improve our economic situation. Thank y'all.